Here we have the Inkberry Holly, Ilex glabra, and I just received this from mailordernatives.com, and it arrives in a plastic bag instead of a pot, but the root ball does appear to be relatively moist. And the other thing about this species is that it has multiple trunks, so I have to select one trunk to be the main trunk and trim away all the others. And the reason I like Inkberry Holly is because it is extremely cold hardy, and I did have another one in the ground when the temperature got down to 4 degrees this winter, and it didn't have any damage or leaf loss or anything, so that's why I just ordered another one. I think there may be a few left. Let's take a look at the other one. Here's my other Inkberry Holly. This was outside during some very cold weather this year. You can see I've got it trimmed down to just one trunk. It has a very tall, skinny trunk here and branches at the top, so I'm hoping it will fill out and become a small tree eventually. But it's a very hardy holly species. And speaking of hollies, let's take a look at the rest of my holly collection, see how it's doing. Here's the Centennial Girl Holly, and unlike the winter of 22-23, this year, in the winter of 23-24, it made it down to -4 without any foliage loss or even really foliage damage, it seems. So I'm glad I left it in the ground and let it resprout, and I will eventually pick one of these branches to become the new tree and trim away all the rest. Here's a Castle Wall blue holly, and as with most of the blue hollies, the constituent species are English holly and Tarajo holly, or Tarajo holly. That would be Ilex aquifolium and Ilex rugosa. So very cold hardy, and it shows no real foliage damage. A few of the leaves are off color, but doesn't appear to be a problem for the Castle Wall holly. I'm curious to see how much growth this will put on next summer. Here's another Inkberry Holly, Ilex glabra, but this one is the dwarf bush form, Ilex glabra densa. But it has a good growth pattern to it, so I think it forms a relatively large bush eventually, and I have it planted in a spot where it's okay if it's relatively small. It's planted in front of this pretty small and slow-growing Japanese white pine, Pinus parviflora. So I'm going to give it a shot too. As I said before, I'm very favorable on Inkberry Holly. I think it is an underutilized species, especially in Middle Tennessee. So I want to give it a chance, see what it can do. Here's my Longstalk Holly, Ilex pedunculosa. I just put this in the ground several weeks ago, and so far so good. Obviously it's pretty small, so I'm hopeful that it will put on a lot of growth this growing season. This is the Blue Prince Holly, another blue holly with the same species that I mentioned on Castle Wall. It has a little leaf spotting over the winter, but overall I'm not that worried. You can see it's a relatively small specimen. So as with most of my hollies, they're starting small, and I'm letting them grow from there. I'm hopeful that will lead to stronger roots. And also that lets me shape them into actual trees rather than shearing them into bushes. I want them to have a normal, as much as possible, pyramidal or conical branching structure and growth structure, so they look like small trees and not large bushes. Here's the Liberty Holly, and on the whole it looks pretty bad considering all the brown on the leaves, but if you can believe it, this is actually way better than last year, because last year it was absolutely frozen back to the ground, and this year it looks like the trunk is still alive for the most part. So we'll see what happens. At this point, there's no point in taking it out. I'll just leave it and see what it does, considering it put on 3 feet of vertical growth last summer from the ground. Maybe it can rebound quickly this time. Here's the Yopon Holly, Ilex vomitoria. Earlier in the season I was worried because of a little leaf discoloration, but they've turned green again recently. And I am really positive about the Yopon Holly at this point, especially considering it survived some very cold weather. I can't wait to see what this does. I believe this one is the Blue Maid Holly, another one of those aquifolium / rugosa hybrids. Obviously, with that rugosa genetic stock, there's not going to be any problem with cold tolerance, considering it comes from eastern Russia. So, looking good. And this is my Ilex Latifolia Auburn cultivar that I purchased at Cedarwood. Got it in the ground now. Trimmed it down to one trunk. So there was some winter burn on it because of the negative or the +4 Fahrenheit this winter. But I bet it will bounce back relatively quickly in the summer. This is the Savannah Holly. It's a cross between Ilex opaca, the American Holly, and Ilex cassine, the Dahun Holly. It had a little bit of, I don't know if this is leaf spot or what, some kind of fungus is getting it. Some discoloration too, I think, due to the cold, but not that bad. We'll see what happens. This is the China Boy Holly that I purchased at Lowe's, and I believe it is a cross between Ilex rugosa and Ilex cornuta, so two Asian holly species. But that rugosa lineage means this is also very cold tolerant, and you can see pretty much every leaf has a nice dark green coming out of the winter. So far so good. It was pruned pretty heavily by the nursery that sold it to Lowe's, so I'm really curious to see how much vertical growth this China Boy Holly can put on during the summer. There's also a China Girl, which I'm assuming the girl has the berries, but I'm more than satisfied with the China Boy because all I want is the green leaves. I don't care about berries. And here is one of my Nelly Stevens hollies. These are everywhere. You can find them at Lowe's and Home Depot. A little bit of brown at the very tip, but on the whole, I would say it looks really great coming out of winter. Much better than last year, but then again, it didn't get below freezing this winter, so it did get cold though. So it was a good test, and still very positive on Nelly Stevens. And considering it put on about 3 feet vertical growth last summer, I have high hopes that it can really put on some vertical growth this coming summer as well. This is the Ilex crenata Japanese holly, the Steeds cultivar. Very vertical, but a lot of times it can also be trimmed into a pyramidal or conical shape. Nice small dark green leaves, and didn't really suffer much winter damage, so I'm going to wait and see how it does this spring. Notice it has these 3 here at the top. Obviously I'll have to make sure only one becomes the leader, so a little bit of pruning will be necessary between those 3, so we'll see. So far I like it. Nice texture to the foliage. This is the Christmas Jewel Holly, and it made it through the winter relatively unscathed. I think I showed in another video there was some minor winter damage on the interior foliage, but I would say it looks pretty good going into the spring. This one also came from Lowe's, I believe. And this is maybe one of my favorites, the Foster's No. 2 Holly, also a hybrid of Ilex opaca and Ilex cassine. And as you can see, there's a little minor spotting on some of the leaves, but other than that, the foliage looks really good. Maybe a little winter burn on some of these most extreme leaf points. On the whole, I would say it looks really good. So very hopeful. There are a lot of large, mature Fosters around here, Foster Hollies. So there's no doubt about its ability to survive and do very well in Tennessee. This one came from WilsonBrothersGardens.com. And here's the Oakland Holly. This may have come from Lowe's or Home Depot, one of the two. They're pretty much everywhere. Made it through the winter. Even the tips of the leaves look fantastic. So for this 4-degree winter, I would say the Oakland did pretty well. Now there's a little browning down here. Maybe there's some winter damage. On the whole, though, I would say it looks great, especially this side over here. And right next to that, we have the Dragon Lady Holly. 2 more Chinese species, I believe. This might be Ilex aquifolium. Actually, that's European, and maybe Ilex perny, which is Chinese. So another quote-unquote blue holly, but this one doesn't have rugosa, so not quite as cold hardy. You can see there's some death on the top of this very long stalk up here. Focus. Yeah, and then down here we've got big mass of foliage that didn't really take much damage in the winter, so it's kind of tall and spindly at this point, but I'm going to try to continue to shape it into a conical / pyramidal shape and hope that being a holly, it will just branch out more in this central area and fill out to a better shape eventually. And here's a straight species American holly, Ilex opaca, looking pretty good. A little leaf spot that may have to do with, I don't know, moisture. Who knows? But so far so good, no real problems on the plain old American holly. And it's in mostly sun, but it gets a significant amount of shade. Here's the Dahun Holly, Alexkada. A little bit of damage to some of the leaves at the very tips. The interior of the foliage looks pretty good. I had some smaller ones that were a little bit more winter damaged this winter, but this larger one looks really good. And I'm still overall positive on Dahun Holly, and this came from shop.arborday.org. Here's one of the smaller ones that had some winter leaf damage. A little bit hard to see. It dropped several leaves, but still has plenty of green, so I'm going to plant it in the ground. Right now it's just healed in. I'll plant that and see what it does. Hopefully it will grow as well as the other one. Here's one more Dahun Holly, Alexkada, which has a lot more winter damage, but still not enough to make me give up on it. And I bet the branch is still alive because I can still see green on the branch / trunk, which means it's just waiting for warmer weather to leaf back out and take off growing again. So I still believe Dahun Holly is good to plant in Middle Tennessee, and it really adds some variety to the texture of broadleaf evergreen foliage, considering it has these long, narrow leaves without any spines. And here's the Screenplay Holly, a hybrid of Ilex Latifolia and Ilex integra, 2 Asian species. And on the books, this shouldn't really be that cold tolerant, but it made it through the winter in remarkably good condition. It was in a little bit more protected location this winter with protection from north winds and partial shade. So I would say whatever it was, it liked those growing conditions, and it survived 4 degrees Fahrenheit very well. So super pleased with that, and can't wait to see how much growth it puts on this summer now that I have it in the ground.